Good morning, friends. Thanks for being here this morning. This is Journey Home Meditation, and you're joining us for the morning sit. We're going to do some contemplation, some breath work, and maybe get into a little bit of meditation together today. I'm Michael, and I am happy to be here. Well, let's start off with just a little bit of tea this morning. Lovely. Well, it's good to be back with you all today. I have been thinking about the ways in which my mind will do its best to avoid discomfort, right? Uncomfortable or painful situations arise in my life, as it does in everyone's life, right? All of us have moments of discomfort or pain. That's one of the Four Noble Truths that the Buddha expressed was there is suffering. And I've found that my mind, and I think many others as well, has been wired possibly to avoid that suffering as much as possible, as much as it can. And it's just something that I notice a lot the more I get into doing sort of grief positivity, like, and working with myself and others in the grieving processes that we have, that I start to recognize the ways in which I will creatively and really subtly begin to avoid confronting my own pain, my own discomfort. And, big surprise here, a lot of the ways in which that works comes as helping others. Yeah. There's that famous figure of speech that those who can't do teach, right? That's always sort of applied to, teachers who are authors but never quite were successful as authors, so now they're teachers. Like this is all based on this capitalist idea of what success is, not the fact that, a lot of us want to be in positions to teach because we want to share the gifts that have brought us so much joy in our lives. But never mind all of that. But at any rate, I think that there is something there when it comes to the urge to externalize my healing process onto others. And so I will actively seek out the times in which I can help someone else. And now I need to be very clear on this, that this is not the same thing as saying that everything that I do when I'm helping is avoiding my own pain. I find that there are moments within the work that I do where my mind starts to want to gravitate away from myself towards that propensity. And it takes active effort to be aware of that. And I see it often in this line of work of peer support and just, death midwifery and working with others in some of their most difficult, struggling times as well. And that uh, when the conversation arises about wanting to open up about our personal pains and struggles, a lot of people in these career paths get terrified, become terrified. Um, we even have all of these safeguards in place to avoid doing that, and we say that it's ethical boundaries. Okay, yeah, but this practice of being able to sit with my own discomfort as a doorway into sitting with the discomfort of others has really been beneficial to me when I find myself wanting to do just that. When I find myself wanting to uh, avoid my own uncomfortable feelings for the sake of helping somebody. And this is also brings up a big issue that I have with helping, with what helping really is. Um, Ram Dass, one of my favorite teachers, has a book called How Can I Help? And the book is talking about all of these elements of the psychology that gets into play, and the practice, how the practices of avoidance can enter into being a helper. And years after Ram Dass wrote that book, he had a stroke. And he said, if I could write that book today, it would be called How Can You Help Me? And the mere act of helping can oftentimes be elevated to this top down sort of charity, um, this benevolence of one to bestow upon another, everything they need to fix themselves. And we can get stuck in that mindset. It's not intentional. I don't believe that anybody that's helping actually sets out with the necessarily an intention to view themselves as above another. But I think that there is sometimes an embedded premise in the cultures that we live in the West, that helping, we even say somebody who needs help, right? Uh, and when we say it, we sort of couch it in this way of believing that they are helpless, without help. And I don't know that that's necessarily the case. I think that what is maybe more um, precise in my experience is that these are people who we are people who need connection. That's where the need is. And when we can create connection with one another, when we can remove barriers that stand in the way of our connection, the things that we need will flow. They will flow. What doesn't require help in the traditional sense of one person is separate and giving to another. It's now we are together. Now we are connected. And when we are connected, we are more aware that we can share the abundance of our earth. We can share all of the gifts that each of us individually have to form, this sort of safety net of collectivity. Um, that maybe is getting a little too heady and a little farther away from what I wanted to talk about in the beginning, but I think it's relevant, at least in my squirrel chasing mind. It's relevant that it's good to remember the ways in which we avoid our suffering by externalizing it onto others. It's just one of the little tricks that my mind tries to pull when I begin to feel my suffering, touch into my suffering. I've become accustomed to a certain level of pain or discomfort, but man, there are those things that it touches on sometimes that just go straight to the suffer, straight to it. those nerves that get touched upon, and it just triggers you into a complete and total defensiveness, right? And my mind, to help protect me, has been wired to avoid those things. And I think that that's one of the benefits of having a practice of awareness, is that we can start to recognize, and this is not about seeking perfection. This is about deepening our understanding. That's all. This is not perfectionism. This is not becoming better than other people. It's not even becoming better than ourselves. This is about understanding the ways in which we are either exacerbating our suffering or diminishing our suffering, right? The ways in which we are either helping ourselves to continue to suffer, or the ways in which we can help to relieve our suffering. That's all this practice is. That's all of this is. And it can come off as really self-righteous. I've seen it. I've probably even done it. Uh, and I can see why people would have those feelings about people who are doing this work. People who are talking about awareness and mindfulness can come off as quite enlightened. And I'm saying that in the most pejorative sense. But it's good to remember and check ourselves on these paths that this is not for my embetterment. This is for my enrichment of my relationship to who I am to this world. It's part of the curriculum, as far as I can understand right now. So as we get to understand the ways in which my avoidance of suffering is the perpetuation of my suffering, then I can start to touch into why it is I might be behaving that way, or why it is I might be feeling this way, so that when I sit down with you, I am not carrying with me all of this avoidance as a way of being. I can recognize when the avoidance wants to come up, and I can allow it to gently go back away. Okay, there's a part of me wanting to avoid this right now. I'm grateful to that part because it's trying to protect me, but I really don't want to be safe right now. I really want to go into uncharted places with you. I really want to grow from my experience of you and with you in this moment. I really want to stretch. One of my favorite poets that I talk about on this morning program often is Andrea Gibson. And I read something of hers just recently that really blew me away. And I'm going to paraphrase it because I don't have the precise quote in front of me, but something along the lines of, when I die, I want them to find my heart and discover stretch marks. Something like that. Wanting to see the stretch marks on my heart. Wow. You know, that's it. And to do that, for my heart to stretch and grow in that way, my capacity for receiving love, my capacity for giving love, I have to be able to sit with the discomfort and the pain and go through the suffering without avoiding it. Um, so that's just what I've been thinking about, is like, wow, what ways are you avoiding suffering today? And it's actually a practice that we did in my death midwifery group, and I've done it a few times since, is to ask, what do you do to avoid suffering? And a lot of people hear this as, what do you do to become healthy? And that's not the question. The avoidance of suffering is the perpetuation of it. The avoidance is one of the things that grows the seed of suffering greater. So the question isn't, what do you do to stay healthy? A lot of people, when we ask the question, will answer, when I say, what do you do to avoid suffering? And they'll say, Oh, I eat a healthy diet and exercise. Okay. Um, then you ask again, what do you do to avoid suffering? And you get to the root of it. And you go down deeper. It's deeper than what do I do to feel good? It's what do I do to not be miserable in this moment? Because the question isn't about, people will say, I don't know how to be happy. And, and I don't know if that's true. I think the question that's more appropriate is, do you know how to be miserable? Because if you don't know how to be miserable, then every time it comes up, you are going to suffer. So, how do you carry your sadness? But I found this poem by William Stafford. This is one of the things that set my mind on this journey today, this morning, is this is the poem I read this morning. William Stafford, it was a poet actually here in Oregon, and he wrote a poem called Traveling Through the Dark. Traveling through the dark, I found a deer dead on the edge of Wilson River Road. It is usually best to roll them into the canyon. That road is narrow. To swerve might make more dead. By glow of the taillight, I stumbled back of the car and stood by the heap. A doe, a recent killing. She had stiffened already, almost cold, and I dragged her off. She was large in the belly. My fingers touching her side brought me the reason. Her side was warm. Her fawn lay there waiting, alive, still, never to be born. Beside that mountain road, I hesitated. The car aimed ahead, its lowered parking lights. Under the hood purred and the steady engine. I stood in the glare of the warm exhaust turning red. Around our group, I could hear the wilderness listen. I thought hard for us all, my only swerving, then pushed her over the edge into the river. Hmm. It's a terribly sad scene. But the thing that got my attention is when he said, I thought hard for us all, my only swerving, then pushed her over the edge into the river. My only swerving. He's standing on this mountain road and there's a deer, and he was recognizing that swerving on that mountain road could be dangerous for other drivers. So he had to do this thing that he didn't want to do. And then he almost didn't do it. He almost did not do the thing that he knew would be most helpful because he was sad and scared and terrified. Frozen for a moment, and his mind started to swerve a bit away from the task at hand. And then he did it. And I thought to myself when I read that, wow, how many ways do I swerve in my mind every day? How many ways, even being in my mind, am I swerving from what is happening inside of my body? And that was really powerful for me. It was really helpful. Finding something helpful is not necessarily the same thing as being helped in a hierarchical way. I find connection to be helpful, and I felt connected through that poem. So that was William Stafford's poem, Traveling Through the Dark. So if you want to Google that poem and read it yourself, you might find a different interpretation. But for me, it spawned this thought about swerving in my mind. And it made me think, wow, I am going to, just for today, really work on when I begin to swerve away from my discomfort or away from sitting with your discomfort. I'm going to honor that moment and do the task at hand. Let's take a few breaths together today if you would like. I'm going to put a little bit of sound on for us today. Sometimes having a little bit of sound can bring me into a place of less distraction. I can focus more inward on what's happening in this moment. So let's find our meditation posture. You can put your feet flat to the floor if you're in a chair as I am, or you are welcome to cross your legs in any position or lie on your back. Wherever you are, whatever position you will find balance, this will be your meditation posture. And balance is the place in our body with the least amount of stress or strain. So find balance. And seeking balance in our body is already bringing balance into our mind. And as you breathe in through the nose to the bottom of the belly, see how your emotions begin to balance. Breathing in and out. Begin to become familiar with this internal landscape and feel how the physical sensations and the emotional sensations and the thought sensations are all connected. Listen to the tension in your own body. It's there giving you something you could use. Notice as you begin to become aware of tension and bring your focus there, the tension begins to release. It's almost as if the pain and discomfort is not trying to be fixed, it is just trying to be witnessed. Just witness who you are right now. Slowly begin to feel your fingers and toes and bring gentle movement into the body, being aware of the sensations of all of that movement. You may have emotional energy start to build up and arise into your chest or your throat, all the way pouring out of your eyes or your chin. You may have physical sensations strengthening in your arms or your hands, wherever it is that you may be or not be feeling in this moment. Just be with it. Thanks, everybody, for being here this morning. You can also find this morning sit as an audio podcast on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or Audible for free on any of those platforms. And you can find archives of the video and also the live broadcast on YouTube if you look that up. I appreciate all the support that I receive from people sending messages. I love reading your messages and communicating with you. And I really appreciate people leaving positive reviews and giving 5 stars or however many stars you feel. So far, it's 5 stars, and I'm really happy for those, because that means that you too are somehow connecting into some of these experiences. And that's pretty good. That's pretty good when we can connect with one another on these things. Because a lot of these experiences can be isolating if we believe them to be. And sometimes belief is challenged with evidence. And when it's evidenced that we are all sharing some of these thoughts together, that things make sense or speak to us, then the belief changes. And we don't necessarily have to believe that we are alone. So thank you so much for being a part of that process and in this connection. I appreciate you all. You can reach out to me, Michael, at journeyhomemeditation@gmail.com. And you can also Well, you do what you want. You can do what you want. It's a beautiful world to try that out. So, audio.